Hey there, and welcome to the Big Apple School podcast. My name is Sam.
Ryno.
And today we're asking what's the crack about Australia, mate? Sounds good?
Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah.
Great place, paradise. Or, well,
I don't know. New Zealand, some people would say more, but
yeah?
I don't know. Let's
lots of hobbits in New Zealand.
Maybe that's why.
Ryno.
Yeah.
Come closer.
Uh-huh. No.
Have you been to Australia?
I have.
Uh-huh. You did. Well, we'll talk about
that.
I have also been to Australia. So, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about that.
We can talk about Australia because we've been there.
We could ask what's the crack about that.
Actually, we can.
Yeah. What's the crack mean, in your opinion?
I have no clue.
Really?
No
okay,
clue.
let me reiterate. I talked about it in a previous podcast. What's the crack can mean what's new, what's happening, what's fresh,
how's it going,
what's interesting. It can, it can be translated news. It can be translated fun, what's happening. It can be, I can actually say you're a good crack, meaning that I enjoy your good fun. Enjoy talking to you.
Interesting.
We can call an event good crack, like it was enjoyable, it was good fun. But we can also use it to say, what's the crack? Oh, well, I have this problem, and it can be a bad thing as well.
Huh. Okay.
And sarcastically...
Multi-use
Oh,
word.
yeah, I mean, every sentence. And we can be a...
Verb, adjective, adverb, noun.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can be a bit sarcastic and go like, he's some crack, as if, like he's being really awkward, sort of, or...
Okay.
But anyway, that's not an Australian word, although they would love to use it, I'm sure. Tell us about your Australian trip. When did you go? What places did you visit?
Actually, it was quite a long time ago. It was in 2002. Some people listening probably weren't even born yet. But yes, it was in 2002.
You and I are not one of those? Yeah.
I was old already, actually. It was when I was... No, I won't tell you. I was working at a school in South Africa, and they had arranged a tennis tour to Malaysia, Singapore, and Australia.
Okay.
So it was a 3-week tour, if I remember correctly. It was about 3 weeks. We spent a couple of days in Singapore, only 3 days, I think, in Malaysia, and then we flew to Australia. So it was in April, which is sort of end of summer then for them, beginning of autumn. So it was a long time ago, and it was for work purposes.
17 years ago.
Yeah, it was for work purposes.
How long were you in Australia for?
Physically in Australia, I think it was about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it was about 2 weeks.
And of course, it's a lot closer to South Africa than the UK or Russia, isn't it?
Distance?
Distance-wise.
No.
Not at all?
No.
Not at all?
It's incredibly difficult to travel to Singapore, to Australia. Well, we traveled from Singapore, which made it easier. But from South Africa, I would say, actually, it's almost the same distance.
Really?
Yep.
How would you go from South Africa to Australia? If
you can fly direct.
Yeah.
You can fly direct.
And how long would that flight be?
Oh, I think about 12 hours.
Really?
It's long, 12 or 14. Or so. It's long. It's a very, very, very long trip.
8 and 7.
So
I had 2 flights.
Yeah, so we went via Singapore. So it was 10 hours, and then I think 8 or 7 or 9 hours again. So it was long.
That's actually
long travel.
Longer than mine.
Yeah, long travel to get there.
Because
actually there's nothing between South Africa and Australia. There's nowhere to land.
They should build a little path.
A little bridge, why not?
I shouldn't talk.
You can drive.
Yeah. I'm an engineer, I shouldn't talk like that.
You can drive there. So actually if you don't fly to Australia direct, you have to go a bit north first.
Right.
And then drop down again to
wow.
Yep. So
you've changed my perspective. Is there anywhere where it's easy to get to Australia?
I guess maybe Japan, maybe China, maybe from
some of those
from the east of Asia,
Asian countries.
I think it's easier to get to.
So I was also in Australia. I know that you want to ask me.
Yeah, I do. When were you there, and why were you there?
I was there in 2015.
Oh, recently.
Yeah. I mean, now it's
fairly recently.
Fairly recently. I mean, close memory, and it was also in their wintertime. I mean, I'm thinking summer, but it's their wintertime. It was July.
It's winter for them.
July, August.
Yeah, it's winter for them.
And definitely winter for them. But a bit confusing for me because there was like plus 26 at times. So that's not winter, that's summer.
Okay.
But it was winter for them. I mean, most people go to Australia, I guess they would probably go to Sydney or Canberra, you know.
The popular tourist destinations.
My mate was in...
Yeah, it's Australian. Your mate.
Oh, but we also use it in Northern Ireland, so it's fine. But my mate from Northern Ireland was working out there. A pastor of a church, or a minister, it's called in his particular church that he belongs to. But a pastor, and he was looking after a couple of churches for a year. And he's my best mate from ages back, right? So we've done everything and traveled a lot together.
Since Pa fell off the bus is the expression.
Since
He's been your mate since
who?
Pa fell off the bus.
Who the heck is that?
A very old, could be a South African expression. I don't know why I thought about that now. My mom used to say that when we've been friends since Pa fell off the bus.
Okay, so he and I, shout out to Andrew if he's listening. There's a chance he'll listen to this podcast. But Andrew and I, he was like, so by the way, I'm in Australia for a year. Why don't you come out? And I was like, fair dinkum, you know? Why not? As Australians would say. So I decided, I was finishing my degree at that time, and I was doing a dissertation, and I had the chance to go out. I didn't have a huge amount of money, but I mean, when someone tells you can come to Australia, stay with them.
Yes,
I mean,
it's good.
That's a big part of the cost.
Accommodation always is.
And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I spent a full month in Australia, most of that with him. And I mean, fairly cheap because I did that. And it was, I might not get the chance to go again. So
you didn't ask me, so I will ask you, where in Australia did you go?
Right. So Perth on the west coast.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember my...
Yeah, I'm also, my geography, I quickly looked at my head, northeast, southwest, where am I?
Never eat shredded wheat is what I remember. There's
news.
A breakfast cereal, never eat
I just said news.
News,
N-E-W-S, news. But you have to jump across. Anyway, besides the point.
So I was in Perth, first of all, but only for a few days. That's where I flew to. It made the most sense to fly there. Then I went to Adelaide for a couple of days. Nice big city, closest big city to where my friend was staying.
Okay.
He was staying in Port Lincoln, which is South Australia. It's fairly. I don't know. I don't have a map in front of me, but I like to think it's fairly central. And it's in the south.
Okay.
And right by the coast. It's very popular with shark diving crowd.
Okay.
I never did that.
Like in South Africa.
But it's very popular for that.
Coast.
And I would have kind of loved to do it. I kind of a little bit regret not doing that. But one, it was...
Shark diving?
Yeah. I mean, in a cage.
Right? No, I know. I tried, and fortunately the weather was bad, so it didn't happen. But maybe not.
Did you get your money back?
Actually, half, yes.
Yeah?
They did return half of it, yeah.
Okay, even though they weren't responsible for the weather, I guess. Yeah, I mean, my friend Andrew was like, hey, you want to do that? I don't think he wanted to. He wanted to know if I would do it. And I was like, well, a little bit expensive.
Maybe not.
It wasn't my plan when I went, and I hadn't budgeted for it.
Yeah, because it is an expensive thing to do. Wherever you do it, it is an expensive thing to do. And
I think I'd also, I mean, I have a great sort of curiosity about sharks. I know I would have really enjoyed it. But I'd recently watched a video, one of those videos where a shark breaks through the cage, you know, like it's...
Oh, fantastic.
So I was like, maybe not. Because I mean, it would be fantastic to see these huge animals, but I think maybe it's better to live.
In the aquarium, I think it's better.
Maybe it's better. Well, but the great whites don't live in aquariums. I'll correct you.
Yeah, they don't. No, they don't.
They can't survive, unfortunately.
Okay, so we were actually on completely opposite sides of the country then.
Right. So we've covered covered Australia.
Almost all of Australia. No, not quite. It's huge. actually, our flight from Singapore went to Brisbane, which is East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And from Brisbane, there's a stretch of coastline down to Sydney,
Yeah.
which is called the Gold Coast.
Okay.
I don't know if it's because the people are so wealthy or because the beaches are a gold color, but
Maybe
it's
both.
maybe both. So we spent quite some time. It was a tennis tour, so we played a lot of tennis along the way against schools and so on. So we drove from Brisbane down to Sydney over a couple of days.
Right.
Playing, stopping in some places, playing tennis. It was magnificent.
Yeah.
The thing is, that part of Australia
Yeah.
it looks almost identical to the east coast of South Africa. The climate, the plantation, it is very, very, very similar to South Africa.
Okay.
And then we were in Sydney, and the last part of the trip we played against a school in a little town called Armadale. And it's almost in the Australian outback. Hours of driving from Sydney.
Right.
So
Are you good at tennis? I should ask.
I played a little bit when I was at school. Many years ago, when we still used wooden rackets, actually.
Okay.
So now, no, useless.
Yeah.
But back then I was okay. I never played professionally or in competitions.
Did you go as a teacher?
Yes.
In charge?
So, there were 2 teachers, actually, and 18, maybe 20 students. It was a busy trip.
Okay.
If you have 20 teenagers running around.
This is why you don't have hair anymore.
This is exactly why I don't have hair and why I look 58 instead of 46.
I'm not commenting on that. I'm not saying that.
Better be to be safe there. So it was a very busy trip, but very, very good.
Yeah.
It was my first international travel.
Wow. Okay. So for me, definitely not my first international travel. I'd been lots of places before, but I want to ask expectation. How was it, your expectation? How did it compare to what you expected?
It's a little bit difficult for me to comment on that. I was so young and so naive about the world and what something other than South Africa looked like. And we went there after Singapore. So Singapore for me was a very huge culture shock because the people look different, the city looked different, the laws are different. You couldn't chew gum. If you were caught chewing gum, then you got a fine. And so for me, that was very strange. And then landing in Australia, especially because the first city we landed in reminded me so much of one of the cities in South Africa. I thought, oh, I'm home. I know this. I know this weather. I know these plants.
Was it a good feeling? You felt like you're at home again, or was it like,
it was strange. No, it was strange. It was like my mind knows. Yes, my mind knows I'm thousands of kilometers from home. But if I look outside the window or driving down the street, they drive on the same side of the road as the South Africans.
Yeah.
The cars look the same.
Everyone good drives on the left, right?
Well,
in trouble saying that.
I want to say that it's right to drive on the left of the road.
I'm joking.
No,
but it is more comfortable for me, of course.
It's our experience, yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Expectations, I think.
Did you expect to see a lot of kangaroos?
Well, actually, I have a kangaroo story. So maybe I did expect to see some kangaroos. I didn't quite anticipate that the part of Australia where we would be in and the traveling we would do would remind me so much of home.
Yeah.
Nature, roads, cars, blah, blah, blah. So for me, it was
different from expectation.
It was almost disappointing.
Right.
It was almost disappointing.
Right.
I think I anticipated something more different to South Africa until I arrived in Sydney. Drove down to Sydney and arrived at night.
Yeah.
And if you are driving from north to south, before you get to Sydney, you sort of climb a little bit, some hills, not a mountain, just some hills.
Yeah.
And it was dark. It was after 10 in the evening when we arrived in Sydney. And all of a sudden, the road drops away and you see the entire Sydney harbour.
Right.
The Opera House, the city, the skyline, the bridge.
Yeah.
It, to this day, if I think about that, I get goosebumps. It was the most spectacular view I have ever seen in my life because it was so unexpected. I was driving,
Just
and then
suddenly,
boom, there it was. It was amazing. So Sydney surprised me.
Yeah.
Sydney was completely different because I knew Johannesburg, which is the biggest city in South Africa, but not pretty.
Okay.
Sydney is pretty. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is beautiful. So that for me was a bit, wow. Here is where my expectations are being met.
So you got got
The passive voice there I used, we were just talking about it. My expectations are being met. And I said, well.
You can do it if you really want. As far as my expectation, I mean...
How old were you? Because that has an impact on expectations.
Well, this was only 4 years ago.
So you were still young.
32.
You were still young.
32. Young, but not too young.
Okay, not mature yet.
What?
Didn't you say you said you matured?
It was 4 years ago.
Okay.
If you talk to my wife, she'll tell you I'm still not mature. But I was 32.
I don't think any of us really mature. I just think our toys get more expensive as we get older.
Right. Yeah. My mom used to call me Peter Pan, because I never grow up.
Oh, excellent.
I think I've grown up a little bit since then. A little bit, tiny bit.
Robin Williams.
As far as weather, I was taken by surprise because I never I didn't do any research to think, I knew I was going in the winter, and I arrived in Perth and it was plus 26. I'm like, this is not winter. But down in Port Lincoln, it was plus 8 or so.
It's colder, more south, further south.
It was chilly.
Yeah.
I actually ended up with a cold. Because the heating wasn't on where I was staying, and I ended up with a cold. And so it was quite strange because, going to Australia and getting a cold, it's not what we normally connect in the UK.
Because you're in the south. It's the south. It's southern hemisphere. It's warm. It's always warm.
Right. As far as animals, I expected to see a lot of kangaroos. I was not disappointed at all. Plenty of kangaroos.
You were in a different area, or
we traveled a bit.
We
traveled a bit, and we were in the car quite a lot. We went across the Nullarbor desert, which so we actually drove. My friend drove from Port Lincoln right the way to Perth, and we did kind of a detour or a
how far is that?
Whistle stop tour. Or what's the correct scenic tour? I
scenic
guess.
tour.
Oh, it was. I think you're testing my memory.
No, was it days? Did you travel for days or 1 day or 2 days?
We took a week to do it.
Okay,
we stopped.
Okay. So it's quite to
stopped
travel.
in a couple of hostels.
Okay, quite to travel.
And it was a journey. It was a journey, and it was part of our experience, and something we still talk about today, actually. But we've seen a lot of kangaroos, especially doing that. But one thing I was surprised about was I didn't see a lot of crocodiles. In fact, I don't think I've seen one in the wild.
I didn't see any.
I think because I grew up, with different stereotypes about Australia, I really expected kangaroos and crocodiles. You'll see both of them.
Of course.
But I gather that some regions have more than others. I think Northern Territory has a lot more than maybe Perth and stuff.
The crocodile.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it was because of the time of year. I don't know.
Season could be wrong.
Yeah.
I forgot. I said I had a kangaroo story. So we didn't have much time in Sydney. Unfortunately, we weren't there for very long, and we didn't visit anything in particular. I think we had 1 day off when we were in Sydney. So it was a very busy tour-wise with tennis and games and matches and people and. Our students were billeted, which means they stayed with families of the schools, parents of where we played, and ourselves. We actually also were staying with people. I stayed with people I knew from South Africa, strangely.
Wow.
But on the last, I didn't see one kangaroo. I did not see one kangaroo until the last 10 hours of our trip. And we were driving back to the airport, to Sydney Airport, to fly back to Singapore. And we were in two, I suppose you would call them minivans or something, a Toyota Hiace is the vehicle. The one teacher with the juniors, the younger students, and I drove behind him with the senior students.
Yeah.
And it was a through the night trip because our flight left at 8 o'clock in the morning and we had quite a distance to travel. And in fact, about 4 hours before we got to Sydney Airport, my colleague hit a kangaroo on the road.
Right.
It jumped across the road as they do.
And they're big beasts.
And boom, into the... Fortunately, the vehicle wasn't too damaged. We could continue driving.
Right.
But we were all...
Was he Australian?
No.
Yeah.
The kangaroo, you mean? No, the teacher was South African.
Yeah. But did anyone warn you? Because
actually, no.
Because I had heard from someone before we went. My mate knew because he'd lived there and he talked a lot to locals. But we knew that we never traveled at night because we knew that was a problem. One of the things we noticed in Australia, the wildlife does not get out of the way.
No, they don't. They get in the way, actually.
Yeah. I think that they don't see enough of cars. I mean, if maybe that's a good thing, I don't know. But for example, my mate was driving along one day between two small towns and a bird crashed and broke his side window, like beside him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it hit, obviously it had been just flying along. Never thought, like in the UK, birds are, look both ways before they cross the road.
Oh, they do. Yes, it's like South Africa. But the lions stop before they cross the road.
But in Australia, the bird just flew into the window. It busted. I guess the bird busted.
I'm sure.
And my mate had the scare of his life.
It must be terrifying, actually, to go through that.
And it was a busy country road, not a busy country road at all. He was probably the only car on it. And this suddenly happened. It must have scared the life out of him. But we knew that it was a bad idea to travel at night because the kangaroos aren't looking both ways either. But if it's nighttime, they won't see a car either. I mean, or maybe they won't appreciate.
I don't know. Maybe sometimes the light actually attracts them. It's something.
Or you don't see them. Maybe that's the problem.
It's too fast. It's too difficult to see them. If they bouncing,
they're jumping along,
jumping around on the side of the road, and then it was a flash. There was no way you could avoid it. But the vehicle was quite damaged. We paid a lot in insurance because it was a rented vehicle. So we paid, I think, then 2002 it was $1,500.
Right. Not cheap.
No, it wasn't cheap. It emptied our tour fund completely.
You got off lightly though.
Fortunately, we were all alive. No one was hurt. But we didn't have a choice but to travel at night because we were still busy the previous day till 10 o'clock the evening. And our flight left the next morning. So we finished dinner. Some people had an hour or two snooze, and the rest of us stayed awake, and we packed the vans and left. It was tough traveling. Very tough.
Did you notice any difference? I'm sure you did. Some differences in the food, the culture, the language. I mean, the way it's spoken, English is spoken.
Of course, the accent. Course, the accent. We all know the Australian accent. I find it quite entertaining. I quite like the Australian accent. Actually, I know a lot of people don't. I really quite like it.
I really like it too. Yeah, it's one of my favorite accents.
And very understandable. Often because it's quite a heavy accent. Sometimes if it is so heavy, you can struggle to understand. But I found them very understandable. I found the people very similar to South African people. Okay. Food. Minor differences again because our coastal cities, and we traveled mostly on the coast, our coastal cities have very similar dishes they prepare, and the restaurants are very similar.
Maybe
I don't know. If I think about the weather again, I think we're close to the same latitude.
Yep. Okay.
So
I'm not going to say yes. I'm okay.
Close. Australia is, of course, not much bigger than South Africa, but the part of Australia where I was, the weather was very, very similar to the South African climate. So again, for me, it was almost comfortable.
Yeah. Homely.
Very homely, yes, except Sydney. It was a complete culture shock for the boy who grew up in a country town, who studied in Johannesburg, in a big city, and then to go to Sydney, which was just wow. Yeah,
I was impressed by Perth and Adelaide, fairly big cities.
Yes,
I liked a lot of good big parks. I wouldn't say there were a lot of really, really interesting places. Maybe I wasn't there long enough or didn't explore well enough, but I was impressed by the weather and the great parks and Wi-Fi on the street. I think it was, I guess a lot of cities have that now, but at the time, 4 years ago, I don't know if it was so
I was there pre-Wi-Fi, definitely pre-Wi-Fi.
I noticed a huge difference in intonation. And I found that when I was speaking with locals, understandable, no problem, absolutely no problem. And to be understood, I had no problem. I spoke clearly enough. There wasn't an issue. But they tended to tell a story and use question intonation.
Yes.
So like I was at the park and I'm like, and it sounds like you should answer
something. Yes. But they expected you to say something. Yeah, I know.
I know you were at the park. You just told me. Right? Yes. But I found that entertaining.
I agree. It is at first a little bit confusing because South Africans speak more British English because we used to be a British colony. So, of course, there's a lot of British influence there. So we have a distinct difference between statement intonation and question intonation.
Okay.
So your ear takes a while to get used to it. But I enjoyed that accent. I really enjoyed the Australian accent.
The only thing is, I know I would offend them by saying this, but I can't tell the difference between New Zealand and Australian. It's all the same to me.
They would get offended.
They would be offended by that.
Honestly, I don't know because I only traveled in Australia. I didn't go to New Zealand.
I know I would know the difference if I spent more time there.
Yes.
But because, I've only ever been in Australia for 1 month, I wouldn't know that. I don't know.
It's very difficult because it's all new to you in any way. It takes a while to understand different accents within a country, and now you're bringing another country, which is it's difficult to understand.
So hopefully, I could explain that and not offend them too much. How is Australia represented in South Africa, in your country, in the media?
So for us, a lot of South Africans actually immigrate to Australia. But the most we hear about Australia is in sport because we are known rivals in cricket and in rugby. Right. So the Australian rugby team and the South African rugby team, historically, huge rivalry between us, and the same with the cricket teams. Yeah. So we don't see them as enemies, but there's a very positive sportsman-like competitiveness between the South African and the Australian people because of South Africa is a huge sports country. We love sport, especially our rugby and our cricket. Yeah. And so do the Australians. So it's a big passion for them.
And
so
if I could say, England also loves, or the UK also has rugby
and cricket.
And cricket, especially in England. And a little bit of rugby in Republic of Ireland, which were fairly successful. Yes. But nothing like the All Blacks or anything, but fairly
The All Blacks are from New Zealand, just by the way.
Oopsie doopsie.
I think.
Yeah, no, you're right.
With a haka, yes. They're from New Zealand.
But, I don't see the rival. I don't, as you can gather, I mixed up the teams.
I could be wrong. So if someone knows the difference, please let me know.
No, you're right. Foster's beer. Do you ever have it? It's like
maybe
stereotypical.
I'm not a beer drinker, so
No, and I'm not either, but it's always connected somehow with Australians. And we have this stereotype that they're all drinking Foster's beer. I don't even know if they have it, actually.
Crocodile Dundee.
Crocodile Dundee?
That, of
Have
course.
you seen that film? Two films, actually.
Of course. Of course. It was very popular in South Africa and I think across the world.
Yeah.
So, yes, Crocodile Dundee.
Always on TV when I was a boy.
Yes.
I love it.
I haven't watched those movies in a very long time, but maybe I think it assisted in creating some of the stereotypes about kangaroos and crocodiles.
I think it really did.
Yep.
Are the stereotypes fair?
I don't think any stereotype about any country is ever fair.
Aren't they based on some reality? I mean, they have crocodiles.
Of course, and
kangaroos.
So does South Africa. Okay, we don't have kangaroos, but we have crocodiles.
Yeah.
I don't know. I stereotypes for me, strangely enough, a lot of my Russian students asked me about any specific stereotypes I had about Russia before I arrived. And actually, I don't know if it's my personality, but I don't pay too much attention to it.
Yeah.
Because I think I try not to be a stereotype. I was not a stereotypical teacher.
Right.
I'm not a stereotypical Afrikaans boy in South Africa either. So maybe that's why I don't really pay attention to the stereotypes, which sometimes is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I think there's an element of truth in them, but they're taken to an extreme.
Like any joke, usually there's a slight element of truth in a joke. It started somewhere. So yes, possibly.
A word or phrase that would summarize your trip to Australia.
No worries, mate.
No worries, mate.
It's the thing that stuck with me and all of us on the tour. It took 2 days and we all said, yeah, like the Australians, and no worries, mate.
You got into the...
Very quickly. So it was fantastic. It really was. I remember more of that trip than I do of the Singapore-Malaysia trip, part of that trip. And of course, as I said to you earlier, Sydney, for me, I would rank as one of the top 3 most beautiful cities in the world. Sydney for me, for me. Maybe it's different for other people, but it made a spectacular impression on me.
Yeah, fantastic. For my trip, I probably would summarize it with the word Nullarbor, or Nullarbor brothers, buddies. Andrew and I mean, we didn't always. I mean, let's say we didn't all see eye to eye. Spend an entire month with your best mate, but I mean, our friendship improved, grown stronger, I think, and we still talk about, to this day, we'll talk about the Nullarbor trip and the night. I think it's called the 90-mile straight, across just one straight road, and we still talk about that. And it was a bonding experience, and it was really good and something completely different for us.
So it actually looks like both of us had a very, very good experience in Australia.
So that was the crack about Australia. We talked a little bit about where we've been personally, our experiences, some a little bit difficult, some great, our impressions, our expectation and reality. Would we go back again? The stereotypes in it, and how to summarize our trips.